There's a figure buried deep inside classified briefings. No spokesperson has read it aloud, no senator cited it publicly. No general has confirmed it on record. This figure remains a closely guarded secret. That figure is 12 missiles. Out of 350. On a night when Iran launched the largest coordinated missile and drone barrage in the history of the Persian Gulf, 350 projectiles crossed into defended airspace at 3:47 in the morning local time. 338 of them never reached their targets. They were shot down, intercepted, or fell apart on their own. The defensive grid held. This layered system cost American taxpayers roughly $2 trillion over 2 decades. It absorbed a historic assault and crushed most of it. But 12 got through. Those 12 missiles struck the Ghawar oil stabilization complex. With enough concentrated force to white out satellite imagery with thermal heat. 47 people died. The world's largest petroleum processing facility is still burning. Every serious military analyst, intelligence service, and defense official woke up to the same question. Not how 338 were stopped, but how 12 slipped past a $2 trillion wall. That answer is now the most dangerous piece of military knowledge on Earth, because the answer is not a fluke. It is not a malfunction. And it is absolutely not what the Pentagon's press conference suggested. To understand what happened at Ghawar, you first have to understand what American military leadership genuinely believed about its own defense architecture. Not what they told the public, what they told each other. 14 months before that early morning launch, a 4-star general named Isaac Murawski sat before the Senate Armed Services Committee. He delivered testimony that has since taken on a different meaning. He presented intercept rate data from every controlled simulation ever run on the Integrated Air Defense Network. The composite figure he gave lawmakers was 98%. 98 out of every 100 incoming threats stopped cold. He described the architecture as a seamless defensive umbrella. He told the committee the system didn't simply react to incoming threats. It anticipated them. The word he chose for its resilience was impenetrable. He used that word in front of elected officials. Under oath. $200 billion invested over 20 years. The Patriot PAC-3 batteries designed to kill ballistic missiles by direct collision at altitude. THAAD launchers capable of engaging targets inside and outside the atmosphere. Aegis-equipped destroyers running radar so precise it can track an object the size of a baseball hundreds of miles away. All of it synchronized. All of it communicating at millisecond intervals. All of it tested, stress-modeled, and war-gamed. In simulation environments that the US military considered among the most sophisticated ever built. The institutional confidence in this architecture wasn't arrogance. It was the result of decades of engineering, billions in R&D, and generations of officers trained inside a doctrine that said the technology was now reliable enough to function almost autonomously. That confidence lasted until 3:47 in the morning. It was gone by 3:48, not because of a weapon nobody saw coming. Not because of a technological breakthrough Iran unveiled that night. What destroyed 20 years of institutional certainty was a method, deliberate, pre-tested, already documented in American intelligence files that nobody had cross-referenced in time. Here is how it actually worked. Layer 1. The signal nobody flagged. The assault on Ghawar didn't begin at 3:47. It began 11 days earlier, and it looked like nothing. 3 Iranian naval fast attack vessels had been operating in the southern Persian Gulf, running what American radar operators logged in their daily reports as routine electronic activity, calibration signals, low-level emissions consistent with standard patrol operations. The kind of traffic that gets archived, not analyzed. It wasn't routine, it was a reconnaissance program. Those vessels were running low-power jamming pulses at precise intervals, deliberately kept below the threshold that would generate an automated alert. Below the line that would cause a human analyst to look twice. For 11 days, they were mapping the American defensive architecture, logging exact frequencies, response timing, sensor overlap zones, and radar signature profiles for every Aegis destroyer in the theater. They weren't probing for weaknesses randomly. They were building a technical blueprint. 40 minutes before the first missile launched, those 3 vessels went to full power. What activated wasn't the kind of GPS jamming America had seen from Iran in 2019, crude broadband static. This was something else. A senior electronic warfare officer described it as targeted degradation. A precision-calibrated interference blanket covering a specific frequency band across the northern Gulf. It didn't blind the Patriot batteries. It slowed them. It introduced microscopic timing errors into the GPS coordinate data that the fire control systems were using to calculate intercept trajectories. The errors were small enough that no automated alert triggered. They were large enough to add milliseconds of recalculation to every targeting cycle. In a system where the margin between a successful intercept and a miss is measured in milliseconds. That's not a small problem, that's the whole problem. That was Layer 1, Layer 2 the wall, and the ghost. At exactly 3:47 local time, 350 contacts appeared on American radar scopes simultaneously. Shahab ballistic missiles, Shait attack drones, cruise missiles. Every category of offensive platform in Iran's operational inventory. All launched within an 18-second window specifically designed to saturate every sensor array in the theater at the same moment. The American military had war-game saturation scenarios. Tacticians understood the concept. What the simulations had never modeled was the layer Iran placed on top of the saturation attack. Aboard the USS Baton in a critical 20-second window during the engagement, radar operators saw something their training hadn't prepared them for. Mixed into the legitimate threat tracks, the confirmed real inbound missiles, were more than 40 phantom returns. Ghost signals. Radar spoofing transmissions broadcasting fake missile signatures at the exact radar cross-section of actual incoming ballistic threats. The system wasn't deceived into thinking the fakes were real. The problem was more clinical than that. The processing architecture couldn't sort the phantom returns fast enough to keep the targeting queue moving at operational speed. For 22 seconds, the Baton's computational arrays burned roughly 40% of their processing capacity on the task of separating confirmed kills from fabricated signals. The intercept queue backed up. And in that backup, in the narrow computational seam between one prosecution cycle and the next, 12 tracks found the gap and flew through it. The system wasn't fooled, it was overloaded. There's a difference. And that difference is what killed 47 people at Ghawar. That was Layer 2. If you're following this breakdown closely, take a second to subscribe to the channel. The next video in this series covers the target that analysts believe comes after Ghawar, and you won't want to find out about it after the fact. Layer 3, the update that waited 8 months. This is the layer the Pentagon has not discussed publicly. Not in briefings, not in press releases, not in any statement that has reached open source channels. Cyber forensic analysts found evidence of dormant malware embedded inside logistics management software used by Patriot battery operators. Not in the radar or fire control systems, but in the inventory management software, which tracks interceptor rounds. The malware wasn't a cyber attack. It arrived via a routine software update from a third-party contractor 8 months prior. It sat inactive for 8 months, triggering at 3:40 a.m., 7 minutes before the first Iranian missile launched. Its function wasn't dramatic, it didn't crash systems. It quietly altered readiness numbers on operator screens for 3 Patriot batteries. It reported full interceptor loads, but physical silos were only at 20 to 30% capacity. Operators made targeting decisions based on these false numbers, distributing assignments as if resources were full. They weren't. By the time the discrepancy became apparent, the engagement was already over. The electronic warfare team cited GPS jamming. The cyber forensics team argued malware was the core weapon, jamming was cover. Both were correct, but their argument missed the point. The 3 layers weren't separate tactics. They were a single integrated weapon. Corrupt GPS timing data, overwhelm tracking algorithms with phantom returns, falsify inventory data. Then route your fastest 12 missiles through the gap your own engineering created. That was Layer 3. No official investigation will include what comes next. Documenting a human decision in a report has career implications. But Captain Sarah Vance, commanding officer of the USS Baton's battery group, documented it herself. Her 61-page report is one of the most consequential documents in modern military history. Out of that battery, a junior officer watched 4 radar tracks flagged as inbound ballistic missiles. The tracks were real, but their radar signatures showed inconsistencies, anomalies not matching his training library. He'd never seen such a screen, simulators hadn't produced it. His training said to trust the system. The system fed him corrupted data. He did what any rational person does when instruments stop making sense. He hesitated 3 seconds. He delayed his engagement command, trying to reconcile his screen with reality. 3 seconds, 4 tracks unengaged, 4 of the 12 missiles that hit Ghawar. The after-action community will call this human error. It is not, it is a doctrinal failure. The American military spent 50 years building systems engineered to replace human judgment with automated precision. The doctrine trained operators to trust data, but never built a protocol for when data became untrustworthy. That officer didn't fail his training. His training failed him. What followed the initial strike at Ghawar moved faster than the diplomatic response could. Within 6 hours, Iranian military command assessed the attack not as a strike, but a successful proof of concept. The shield was penetrated. The architecture's breaking point was confirmed with a 47 casualty dataset. The order was given for a second wave, targeting American military installations at Al Asad Air Base and a regional facility. Captain Vance watched the second wave appear on her scope. Her battery's interceptor stocks dropped from amber to red. Her crew operated in a live electronic warfare environment where nothing on their displays could be fully trusted. The math of the second engagement was logistical, not tactical. Available interceptors minus incoming missiles produced a negative number. By the time the second engagement concluded, regional interceptor reserves across the Gulf were drawn down by 40%. Not in one catastrophic exchange, but 2 methodical, deliberate ones. Iran now had precise empirical data. They knew what it cost to drain American defensive capacity by nearly half in a single operational period. The USS Gerald R. Ford Strike Group operating in the Gulf received a repositioning order at 9:15 that morning. The carrier steamed toward the open Arabian Sea. The intelligence community's internal language was not diplomatic. Iran's anti-ship ballistic missile capability was recategorized. Moved from *potential threat* to *demonstrated *. The most expensive warship ever built withdrew from the Persian Gulf. The geopolitical translation happened in real time. Crude oil futures jumped 15% before markets digested the morning's satellite imagery. The financial logic was direct. If 12 missiles can reach a target inside a $2 trillion defensive perimeter, every oil facility within Iran's 2,000-kilometer strike radius were priced overnight. Insurance actuaries don't wait. In Brussels, an emergency NATO session produced careful, measured public language. But in the corridors, a senior French official raised the phrase, *European strategic autonomy*. That phrase isn't about military spending. It's about whether mutual defense under American guarantees is still reliable. Once that question is asked aloud in a NATO corridor, it does not get quietly shelved. At the Pentagon, the investigation team spent 4 days establishing the facts you've just read. They disagreed on which layer was primary. Electronic warfare specialists pointed to GPS jamming. The cyber team insisted malware was the anchor. The human factors team kept returning to the hesitation event. All 3 groups were right. And that consensus was the most alarming conclusion possible. Because it meant the failure had no single point of repair. You cannot patch a defensive architecture against a weapon that uses the system's own complexity as the primary attack surface. Complexity is not a flaw simpler systems avoid. It's the condition of every advanced defense network on Earth. On day 5 of the investigation, cross-referenced intelligence intercepts changed the nature of the inquiry entirely. Analysis of Iranian fast attack vessels. Encrypted communications revealed that 11 days of pre-attack electronic activity had been timed with precision to coincide with routine contractor maintenance windows, periods when American monitoring systems ran on, reduced staffing rotations and automated archiving protocols. Iran had studied the American intelligence observation rhythm long enough to know exactly how to operate below the threshold that would generate a human review request. 3 American agencies had logged pieces of the operation. The NSA had flagged elevated electronic emissions. The Defense Intelligence Agency had recorded the vessel activity as routine coordination. Navy surveillance had captured the jamming pulse tests and auto-archived them. 3 separate data sets, 3 separate agencies. 1 coherent Iranian reconnaissance program. Nobody connected the points. Captain Vance's 61-page after-action report contains 38 pages that will not appear in any official published findings. Those pages document something that may be the most important operational consequence of the Ghawar engagement. The crew of the USS Bataan stopped trusting their own systems. Not as a policy decision, not as a procedural response. as an instinctive, rational reaction to a live engagement environment where the displays and physical reality had stopped matching. A tracking supervisor stopped updating his firing priority queue and began working from manual inputs. An operator physically walked to a launch tube to verify its readiness status before reporting. A process that added 14 seconds to an engagement cycle designed to complete in 14 seconds because a trained professional chose to verify with her own eyes rather than trust a screen that experience had just told her might be lying. Vance's summary of her crew's psychological state. Across that engagement is 11 words. She wrote, "Asterisk, we trained them to trust the system. The system betrayed them." Asterisk emergency patches were distributed to address the documented software vulnerabilities within 72 hours of the attack. The patches introduced their own layer of operational uncertainty. Crews began running manual verification checks on outputs that the updated software was theoretically now producing correctly. The trust deficit didn't close when the patch deployed. The humans had absorbed a lesson the software update couldn't undo. Here is the assessment that defense analysts are arriving at, and that the Pentagon's official public posture has not yet acknowledged. The American missile defense architecture is not asterisk broken asterisk. Broken implies a repair brings it back to baseline. The correct term is asterisk obsolete asterisk, and those two words are not interchangeable. The architecture was designed against an adversary who would attempt to overpower it. What happened that Ghawar was an adversary? Who chose to asterisk confuse asterisk it instead? More interceptors do not solve a confusion problem. More processing power does not solve an adversary who engineers attacks to consume that processing power. You cannot add your way out of a doctrinal mismatch. The next generation defensive architecture that addresses these vulnerabilities is currently between 8 and 15 years from full operational deployment. That is not a rumor. That is the Pentagon's own program timeline. For the entire duration of that deployment gap, the architecture that failed at Ghawar is the architecture America and its allies will be relying on. In his closed briefing to the Joint Chiefs the morning after the Ghawar attack, General Moravsky delivered a statement that produced silence in the room. He said the system had performed exactly as it was designed. 47 dead. The world's largest oil processing facility on fire. And the man who built the architecture said it worked as intended. He wasn't lying. Every individual component, the PAC-3 batteries, the Ghawar launchers, the Aegis tracking systems, performed within documented operational parameters. The design intercept probabilities held. The system executed the function it was built for. The design simply never incorporated an adversary running an 11-day electronic reconnaissance operation timed to contractor maintenance cycles. It never included malware delivered through a trusted software supply chain. It never modeled a swarm attack ratio, specifically calculated to push tracking algorithms past their processing threshold. And it never built a human performance protocol for the moment an operator's screen became a liability instead of an asset. The system was built to defeat missiles. It was not built to defeat a asterisk methodology asterisk. Those are two different problems. If this level of detail matters to you, subscribe to the channel. The establishment press covered the casualty count and the oil price spike. This channel covers the 40 pages nobody published. The final element of this story is not the attack itself. It is what happened in the 48 hours afterward. Within 2 days of the Ghawar strike, Iranian military channels had distributed the operational details of the engagement to healthy planning cells, to Hezbollah technical units, to proxy force commanders across Iraq and Syria. Not as intelligence sharing. As a curriculum, the breakdown of how the 4-layer method had functioned, what it cost, what it produced, and what defensive gaps it exposed was packaged and distributed as transferable doctrine. The message wasn't, Iran successfully struck a target. The message was, asterisk, the method works. Here is how to replicate it. The cost is achievable, asterisk. The vulnerability of a $2 trillion defensive architecture is now a study module for non-state actors, operating on fractions of that budget. Captain Vance received her new deployment orders within days of filing her after-action report. The baton was being redeployed to the eastern Mediterranean at high speed. She would be operating with interceptor stocks at 60% of standard load, with software her team had not finished validating. Into an electronic warfare environment designed and studied by an adversary that had access to the same field test results Iran had just generated at Ghawar. She called her senior officers together before the ship left port. She told them, asterisk, the system is going to tell you things that aren't true. Asterisk, asterisk, your job is to know when that's happening. Asterisk. That is a commanding officer instructing her crew to trust their judgment over their instruments. In a military context that invested 50 years specifically eliminating the need for that kind of instruction. In one of the Pentagon's secure analysis rooms, a red line map shows the 12 terminal trajectories from Ghawar. The tracks themselves are fixed. But the analysts keep studying the space between them, the 3 dark corridors between the coverage arcs, the seams, the gaps the architecture never designed for because the design assumed they couldn't exist. The question nobody in that room has answered. How many other adversaries are currently running their own reconnaissance operations? Mapping seams, logging frequencies, timing their electronic probes below the alert threshold, inside the coverage architecture. Of the next target on their list? Ghawar was not a missile strike. Ghawar was a published audit result. The attack was the proof. The next operation is the application. 350 launched, 12 penetrated, 47 dead. A carrier group repositioning out of the Gulf. Regional intercept reserves down 40%. The blueprint now distributed to every proxy network on Earth, and the press conference mentioned none of it. The $2 trillion shield wasn't defeated with a sledgehammer. It was taken apart with 4 simultaneous precision instruments, each one targeting a different layer of the system, each one engineered to work in combination with the others. The 47 at Ghawar are the confirmed cost of what Iran proved that morning. What comes next is the question the red lines on that map are still asking. Nobody has answered it yet. Subscribe to this channel right now, not when you think of it later. The follow-up video covers the facility analysts believe is next on the target list, and it publishes in 48 hours. You should already be subscribed when it drops.